Welcome back to another episode of our Water Safety Wednesday with Marie and Falou. And Falou, would you like to introduce our first guest?
Yeah. Leah Stancil begins her third season as the head coach of Tulane University swimming and divining program. In 2 seasons as head coach, Stancil has led a strong foundation in elevating the green wave swimming and divining a program as Tulane students athletes have made 20 trips to the medal stand at the American Athletic Conference Championship, while 13 individuals have earned all league honors. In addition, 8 school records have fallen under Stancil's direction. Stancil arrived at Tulane in August of 2018 and brought a wealth of experience to Uptown campus, having served an assistant coach for 10 years at the University of Florida, her alma mater. During her time in Florida, Stancil worked with both men's and women's programs for 2 seasons. Before that, she was an assistant coach at the University of South Carolina. Stancil was a 12-time NCAA All-American, 2-time Olympian, 4-time national record holder. Her native country, Barbados. She was a member of the 2002 Florida Gators SEC Champion team. In addition, Stancil was named Barbados Female Sportsperson of the Year 1995 through 1997. In fall of 2016, Stancil was inducted into the Barbados Sports Hall of Fame. Stancil graduated from Florida in 2002 with a bachelor's degree in psychology, and she earned her master's degree in sports and exercise psychology from UF in 2006.
Awesome. All right, we also have Janelle Atkinson with us. Janelle is a 2-time Olympian representing the country of Jamaica. In the Sydney 2000 Games, she placed 9th in the 800-meter freestyle and 4th in the 400-meter freestyle, and competed in the Athens 2004 Games. Dubbed the 2000 U.S. National High School Swimmers of the Year, Janelle went on to compete for the University of Florida, where she became a 3-time SEC champion, 2-time runner-up at the NCAA Championship, and a 10-time All-American. With a vast knowledge of competitive swimming, she then went on to coach collegiately for 12 years at the Division I level, 8 years as an assistant coach, and 4 years as a head coach. During this time, she helped her athletes achieve individual and team conference titles, as well as countless school records. Her experiences as a multiracial female, as both an athlete and coach, led her to pursue consulting in DEI to shed light on the racial climate in aquatics, and to open conversations about race within the aquatic community and beyond.
Wow, that was a way better biography.
No. I saw yours, I was like, let me add a little bit more. But actually though.
All right, so Falou, I think you have the first question, or do I have the first? Oh, it's me. All right, perfect. Oh, our first question that we have today is, what was your introduction to water safety education for each of you?
I'll let Janelle go first.
Okay. I thought you were going first. All right, so my first experience with water safety education, growing up, we had a pool in our backyard, and my parents wanted myself and my siblings to be safe, so they paid for private lessons, and it was definitely not a formal, okay, here's what we do. It was you grab the kid, you throw them in the water, and then you yell, come back. So it was a lot of tears. It was on a Sunday afternoon. So we went to church first thing Sunday morning, had Sunday school right after. And then when parents remembered to pick us up, then we'd drive up and we'd see our instructor at the gate, and we're just bawling, trying to hide, because it was very traumatizing. But that's the extent of the water education for us. What about you, Leah?
For me, I'm the youngest of 3. I am an oopsie daisy baby. And so my brother and sister, my brother's 9 years older than I am, but they're 15 months apart. And so my mother put me in swim lessons because they did swimming. So that's how I got into swim lessons. We did not have a pool at our house. I used to beg my father for a pool, but he actually refused to put a pool in because he was scared that I would drown. And then he would also say, you have an entire pool right around this island, so why do you need a pool in the backyard? So my extent of water safety really came from just going to swim lessons and learning how to swim. But also as I was growing up though, if water safety ever came into play, it was when we went to the beach. So, and I mainly learned that from my sister. So just learning, don't try to fight against the current, let the current take you out. She would always take me from the time I was young. My earliest memories when I was 8, she would always take me when we went to the beach. She would always let me, one of the beaches we went to had a huge raft. So we would swim to the raft. But then when there were a lot of waves in the water, she would teach me how to go over a wave, go under a wave, how to swim back to the pool, swim back to the shore. So all of it really just came from my sister putting me in really scary situations, but nothing formal by any stretch of the imagination. But there was definitely a respect for the water. You had to have a respect for the water.
How do you define water safety? What level of attention is given to water safety education in Barbados and Jamaica?
So how do I define water safety? I personally define it as having respect for the water. Knowing not to fight the water, just to know how to handle yourself in the water in a safe manner. Actually, when I got these questions, I texted my sister and somebody else in Barbados to be like, wait, I don't remember ever growing up and having any sort of public service announcement about learning how to swim. But I do remember them having service announcements about again, at the beach. Mainly the topic was the beach, about tide, watching the tide, rip current, if there's sign, so stuff like that was where water safety kind of came up for Barbados, but not related specifically with the pool.
So for me, water safety really comes down to understanding the water and knowing how to be safe in and also around it. With being from an island, obviously, we're surrounded by water, but we also have, rivers and falls and all these things. So for me, at least, kind of understanding water safety was really just about, okay, it's not just when I'm in the water, but also when I'm seeing other people in the water and knowing that I can't just, jump in and save them, especially when I was younger. The level of attention, I think it's gotten better in terms of getting the word out on how important it is to be safe around water in Jamaica, but we still have a good ways to go because there's still drownings all the time. And a lot of it really is in rural parts of the country. Jamaica is a lot bigger. So even though there has been a shift towards educating people about water, it's usually based on water in the pool and not so much in, by the rivers, in the ocean or anything like that. So a lot of these drownings actually do take place outside of the city. And that's, I think, where a lot of the focus should be put, but baby steps, we'll get there.
Well, building off of that question, we were kind of wondering, are there any differences that you guys have experienced between the aquatic culture coming from island countries compared to the United States?
The aquatic culture, I'll start by saying, from the sports perspective, aquatics doesn't necessarily get as much respect, I would say, as an athlete as other sports do. So if you think of it in terms of in the US where, football and basketball are kings, in Jamaica, and I don't want to talk for Leah in Barbados, but, track and field is certainly up there, netball, football, which is what you guys call soccer, and even cricket. And it's one of those things where we're always fighting for, I guess, kind of not necessarily respect, but just acknowledgement with how hard we work and how hard it is to get to the level that myself and the other Olympians from Jamaica have gotten, and just being able to feel like you had a seat at the table. In terms of just water safety in general, it's a little bit different because, again, a lot of the focus is just on, pool water, as opposed to paying attention to the rivers, the rip tides, the currents, and educating people on those things, because that's really where the danger lies, as opposed to in the US. My husband, for instance, he learned how to swim. He tells me all the time, it's like a ocean, or like in the beach basically, and they taught them there how to understand the riptides and the currents. So having that kind of education, we're out in Long Island, New York, which I guess kind of sort of is like an island also, and being surrounded by water, that they took the time to focus on that specific aspect of water safety.
For me, in Barbados, they don't do much education right now. Like, it's not much talking about, drowning and the importance of specific, like in the US, a lot of what I hear, again, mostly through USA Swimming, is the importance of learning how to swim, to avoid drowning in pools. I lived a long time in Florida, so that was a big topic to do, having a gate for the pool and protecting the pool, and the percentages of the probability of drownings that's high, specifically in Florida, because a lot of people have pools and kids jump in. So there's a lot of talk about drowning and being safe and making sure to learn how to swim or learning how to handle themselves in the water. But growing up in Barbados, that necessarily wasn't what was discussed, but there was a lot of introduction to learning how to swim. So for example, primary school, part of primary school curriculum is learning how to swim and swimming. And so there is a lot of preparation within, when I say primary school, I guess that would be the equivalent of elementary school here. So most, if not all of the public schools do some level of learning to swim in a pool. Before they had the current Aquatic Center in Barbados, they did a lot of their learn to swim in the ocean. So similar to what Janelle was just saying about her husband having learned to swim lessons in the ocean. So I think that is the biggest difference, in that there is a lot of discussion topics about it here in the US. In Barbados, they don't talk about it as much, other than in the ocean, because I think if there are any drownings, it's mainly in the ocean. So for example, my sister is a doctor in Barbados, and I asked her, after I saw your questions, about what, if there's drownings that happen in Barbados, and she said that yes, most definitely, but a lot of it is tourists. A lot of it is tourists that are drowning, but there isn't any education specifically in terms of public service announcements about water safety and learning to swim or learning to be safe around the water, besides ocean. I just remember distinctly having public service announcements on TV about, this color flag means this color, so stuff like that. And then there's also a very huge presence at the beach because of that, with lifeguards and to help with that safety.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out too, just as Leah was saying, that there's no, unlike here in the US where, you have the American Red Cross and you have all, I forget what the other one is, but there are different levels of being able to teach swim lessons. There's no formal education or training for people who want to teach swim lessons in Jamaica. I don't know if it's the same as Barbados, but basically people who teach you how to swim are ones who just know how to swim, and they're just teaching you random things. So when you get to a competitive level, coaches there also, again, the same thing. We don't have USA Swimming where they have their specific, levels of coaching, or level 1, level 2, anything like that. Anyone can get up and be like, I'm going to coach and I'm no coach, and no one's going to question you.
What are some areas of improvement or disparities related to water safety education in Barbados and Jamaica?
I think in Barbados is just, just having it, just making it a priority to, for people to do it. More public service announcements probably would be helpful. So I think that's the biggest improvement, just making it an awareness. And I don't know if it's not happening because it's not a high percentage of drowning for local people. As I said, I asked my sister, and her thing was a lot of it is tourists. And so, which makes me think, now she wasn't specific, but it makes me think it's tourists specifically in the ocean, because the water changes all the time. Sometimes it's rough, sometimes it's calm, sometimes it has a rip current, sometimes it doesn't. as I said, I only learned from my sister taking me out when it was rough, because she wanted to go out and I wanted to be with my sister. But there was always like, do not tell mommy and daddy that I'm taking you out doing this right now. I'm like, okay, just go.
I think one of the, like I said, Jamaica has done a better job of getting information out, but unfortunately it's just almost kind of like, it's every once in a while. So it's not like a consistent message that's being said all year long. It's more, it's kind of like every, when you hear another drone, it's like, oh, we got to talk about water safety. And then they do it the one time, check the box, and then it's done. So having some level of consistency and also having some level of training curriculum for instructors, for lifeguards, because most of our beaches in Jamaica, we don't have lifeguards. Pools, no lifeguards. Everything is do at your own risk. So being able to have some sort of formal education with that, I think would go a long way. And then also being able to actually teach swimming the correct way. As opposed to just, like I said, throw somebody in and say swim back. I don't think they do it anymore, but that was just, lucky me. I hope they don't do that anymore.
You ask my family members, that's how I learned to swim. I don't quite remember it that way, but okay.
No, I definitely remember it that way, and I'm still traumatized to this day.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, between that and then basically, just as I said before, with just kind of having some education in terms of making it a priority, especially for the more rural areas, and being able to have something in place for rivers, oceans, and almost kind of being able to separate the three, because it's, even though it's water, it's still a different kind of water. So being able to understand that, I think, would go a long way.
We don't have the river thing.
We definitely have the river thing.
Yeah, you definitely have the river thing. We just have oceans and pools, but ocean is definitely the priority.
Great. Well, the next question actually is very similar to our last question. And it was, what do you believe are next steps for water safety education and drowning awareness in Barbados and Jamaica? And I guess what I'm now wondering is whether you think, comparing your origin countries to the United States, if there's anything that each other can learn from each other and kind of improve on water safety education.
One thing that I would honestly, just as I'm thinking about it, would love to see is if there was almost kind of like a Caribbean council that puts these steps in place, and that's going to go across the Caribbean, so it's recognized by everybody, and that way we're all giving the same message no matter what island you're on. Because at the same time, like, to me at least, just as the US is grouped as like one, it's states, but it's one US. I sometimes see the Caribbean as we're islands, but we're one region. So having something that is more region-based, I think would actually help a whole lot. And it wouldn't be something that's coming from, oh, well, the Americans are doing it, or, the English are making us do this. It's something that's done by us, for us. And I think that would send a stronger message, because it's people who are like them that are teaching them these steps and teaching and almost kind of like helping them understand how to be safer on, different types of water. I think that would be a really cool project to do. Maybe I'll actually put my thinking cap on and call some people. But even if it's something where, the Caribbean Olympians really kind of put our heads together and really come up with a game plan of rolling something like this out, I think would be such an incredible opportunity for all of us to really almost like leave a lasting impression on, our region that we are so proud of to represent at the highest stage, and be able to give back in a entirely, I feel like unique way.
What she said, that's a really good
Let's do it, Leah.
I can't top that. That's actually a really good idea. I think that that is one thing that is probably lacking quite a bit. And I am not in tune at all with the education. Besides, what I think I really like that Barbados has set up is, as I mentioned, the swimming curriculum from a young age, from that primary school time of coming to the pool. And I really hope they still do that, because I think that is a really important step, because swimming, as you guys know, is a skill, and it's a everlasting skill. It's not like you learn how to swim at 84 and you forget about it at 84. You know it forever once you know it. So I think that's one thing that I really appreciate with Barbados. But you know, as I said, it's what Janelle said. I think that's a good idea. I'm all for that, Janelle.
Let's do it.
How can we become culturally conscious when addressing water safety education?
I think one of the things that I have learned is people of all races, but specifically white people, I guess, is learning the history as to why, specifically in this country, learning the history as to why and how things have ended up the way that it's ended up. You know, that there's the lack of access. Historically, it's a lack of access for Black people to even have access to pools. And then when they have had access, because they haven't had the direction that they've needed to have, people end up drowning, which then creates fear. And that fear is passed on generation to generation to generation to generation. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is for those people who have had access, the little bit of access, and who may have learned how to swim, the sport is so expensive. It's such an expensive sport, especially here in the States. It is very expensive. And so, you know, whether it's Black people or just people that are not as well off, it's not accessible to everyone. It's accessible. I mean, for crying out loud, a tech suit is like $500. You know how many things I could do with $500? Like it's just a little, I know that's my side note. So there's two different aspects. There's a historical side of it where it's the basic knowledge to learn how to swim, or the basic accessibility to learn how to swim. And then there's the other side of it of, okay, I'm in swimming now. Are there people like me in the sport? And how is it that I'm going to stay in the sport? As a Black female, what is it going to do to my hair? Like, there's just so many different aspects. There's so many different factors that I think it's a matter of people being, specifically white people, educating themselves as to why it is how it is. It's not a simple like, oh, it's because of this. There's so many different facets to it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Leah. A lot of it, you know, I always say the same thing: consistency and access. Consistency of having access to pools or having access to water. Consistency of having access to someone who can help you learn and understand how to be safe around water, how to swim. And the huge misconception I feel like a lot of times is even just kind of, okay, well, if we'll just like, even if we just provide free swim lessons. And, you know, ironically, this is one of the issues that has come up with a small organization that operates on in Treasure Beach. They're named as Little Swimmers. And it's actually a English girl who came down on vacation with a family. The dad ended up drowning trying to save one of the boys. And then she basically started this free swim lesson. Well, that's great, free swim lessons. You don't have to pay for anything. But the problem that they faced with was, how are they getting the kids to the pool? You know, so it's one of those things where, and Leah, you know, I hate to call out our islanders, but at the same time, a lot of it is just kind of like, that's the big complaint. It's like, okay, well, how are they going to get there? Well, we're providing you free swim lessons. You can't just get the child here. And it's like, no, I work or have all these other things to do. One of the other things too is that a lot of this, like, there's no real desire to want to swim because the quote unquote, my mom didn't swim, her mom didn't swim, their parents didn't swim, none of us swim. So why do you need to swim? And we turned out fine. And even then, again, back to the same sports situation where it's like, okay, well, if I can just run and there's road everywhere, there's no shortage of tracks, I can do it anywhere I want. But here is swimming, I have to be around water and I have to be in basically like a pool, or I can do open water, but that's going to be a lot more dangerous if nobody else is there. There are all these different factors where it's like, but if I can still go to the Olympians running track and field and make all this money or have all this notoriety, or just go and be a swimmer and it's be like, I'm going to choose track. And even then, the time that it takes to the effort, the time that it has for practices versus the time for other sports, it's a little bit different. And if you're out of the water for a week, Leah, you know this, how awful do you feel when you jump right back in? So that same level of consistency of having to constantly be pretty much kind of like in touch with the water to continue to sharpen those skills and to sharpen all the things that you've been working on, because if you stay out of it for too long, it's going to be a lot harder of a road getting back in.
Yeah. I would give Barbados credit. Like I mentioned, the school learn to swim programs, like they bust the kids over. And so that at least eliminates some level of, the obstacle of transportation. And then I think also piggybacking off of what Janelle said, as she mentioned, if my grandmother didn't swim, my mother didn't swim, as that passing down that culture from generation to generation, I had this discussion with my swimmers actually to kind of remind them, because obviously the majority of my team is white, not all of them, but the majority of them are white, and I explained to them, maybe the approach needs to be different in terms of educating the parent, the grandparent, as opposed to trying to get the child there. Educating and reaching it's almost like the target market should be the parent, the grandparent, to help them understand this is to help your child. This opens up so many other doors for them. It opens up, doors to be able to go to a birthday party that has a pool, and that kid being able to play in the pool, and as opposed to sitting on the side while all the other kids are playing in the pool. Like something very simple that people just may not even think about. But I think a big part of it is because there's such a fear. Over generations, it's a fear of the water. So because they're fearful, they don't let their child in it, and they've convinced themselves they don't need to do it. And so, a child gets close to the water and everybody knows, you go, oh my gosh. And that child all of a sudden is like, oh my gosh. And then it just kind of snowballs from there. There's just, as we discussed, there's so many different facets. It's not a very simple solution, but it's for people willing to investigate and figure out what those different facets are.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on something else that you had mentioned too before, Leah, in terms of once people of color are on the pool deck, it's pretty much like, how do they stay there? And, as you had mentioned before, with white people or pretty much anybody else, even Asians to an extent, having people who don't look like you feel welcomed, because a lot of the stuff that I have stories upon stories upon stories of, the assumption that I didn't know how to swim. And, little comments that were made that I don't think were intentionally supposed to be hurtful, but now that I'm a lot older and I'm doing a lot of DEI work, I'm remembering some of these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was awful. Like, I can't believe I just laughed that off. And it was like nothing. So I would say like my first coaching job as the assistant coach, I'd finished my, 2 Olympic, journeys. And I went to the pool to swim, to work out, because here I am thinking, I'm like, I can't do cardio. I hate cardio. I can't run. I don't want to do it. I was like, I'll just swim for 20 minutes and be done and feel good about myself. I went to the pool and the lifeguard immediately was like, excuse me. And I was like, yeah. She's like, well, we're leaving soon. So yeah. And I was like, okay, I'll be quick. I know the pool closed in 30 minutes. Like, that's fine. She's like, no.
That's all I need.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you don't even know. And she's like, oh, well, but we're going to be, cleaning and, doing stuff. So we're not going to be like watching the pool. I was like, you're good. I think I can handle myself. I may have to jump in and save you, but sure. But it was just like, and I remember when she said that to me, I was just kind of like so taken aback. I'm like, I understand that you have no idea who I am, and that's fine, but you can't just go up to people at a pool and assume that they don't know how to swim and they don't know what they're doing, and then have the nerve to tell them like, well, I'm a lifeguard and I'm not going to watch you.
Yeah. And it's not like you want to be like, I'm a finalist in the Olympics.
Yeah.
You can shut your face. Thank you. Thanks, but no thanks.
Google me.
Yeah, and you know what? I can't think of instances like that because I feel like I just put that kind of crap at the back of my head, like, okay, whatever, like moving on. But yeah, those kind of things exist all the time. Or you walk on a pool deck and you just feel the eyes watching you. Like, but you know what? I have a confession to make. I love to go to meets in Atlanta because all the people that are manning the doors, manning this, manning that, or whatever, are usually Black people. And they let me get away with so much stuff. It is fantastic. I absolutely love it. By the end of it, they know me, I'm waving, and like it's fantastic. Like the last time I was in Atlanta, sidebar. The last time I was there was for US Open a few years ago, and I was going through chemo. And like they usually there's a door that leads to stairs, and they usually open it just so that air comes in, but they never let anyone go on the staircases, or it's usually somebody's manning that door to avoid anyone going through there, except Leah Stancil. Like I would go and sit on there all the time just to lie down, just to get some fresh air, because sometimes the Georgia Tech pool kind of gets a little stuffy. But many a times, anybody else no, sorry, sir. You So like there is, like, because we're so far and few between, that other Black people do recognize you. But yeah, eyes, the looks, but yeah, this is a sidebar. This is a completely different. This is not a water safety issue.
It's all right.
Going to your point, Janelle, like I never realized, we talk about whiteness and white privilege and that kind of stuff, but I consider myself very privileged because I grew up in a country that the majority of the people were Black. The majority of the people that were on the pool deck with me were Black. And so I never second guessed it. I never felt uncomfortable. I never it was a social interaction for me. I never felt less than. So to kind of hear the stories of Americans that grew up here, it just really makes me sad. It makes me appreciate where I came from. Now, I was always aware of my race. I was always aware of how Americans treated people that were Black, but I never had to experience it growing up. So it really makes me sad to hear what other Black swimmers have had to go through, the just snide comments, Janelle and I used to be mixed up on the pool deck all the time. I'm like, I'm 10 feet taller than her. How could you even?
Go for it. But yeah, she's a lot taller. Yes.
She swims distance, mid-distance. I'm a sprinter. But again, we would just laugh it off. Time, but that's just those subtle things. Like you guys can't even take the time to just realize there were two different people, not even different heights. So anyway, but we used to laugh it off all the time, but now looking back, it's like, oh gosh, that's bad. You guys are bad. So
well, thanks for going in depth on that question. It was really, really important stuff. Unfortunately, we're going to bring it back to water safety. And I'm just gonna remind our invisible audience that our water safety tip for this week is know your limits. Holding your breath is dangerous. And as we're talking to two incredibly talented swimmers that had such successful careers, we were wondering how you guys navigated high performance training versus knowing your own limits. Because so often there's the pressure to hold your breath for such long periods of time in training, and we're kind of wondering how you guys navigate that.
So I'll let Leah do her bit as well. Leah and I swam completely different events. And for me, breathing I could breathe in my events. Whereas in Leah's events, it was a little bit more kind of shaky as to when she could, shouldn't, whatever. Yeah. But, the thing when it comes to competitive swimming, the hard part is that any little thing that goes wrong could impact the entire race. And with even though Leah's races were a lot shorter than mine, that didn't make breathing I guess kind of less important or more important, because I still had to time out my breathings, because they'll tell you all the time, okay, if you take a breath inside of these flags, that's the difference between winning and coming last. And, you know, that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. And not to say that, like, you know, oh, we don't know how to handle pressure, but it's one of those where when things don't go right, you will regurgitate those races over and over and over again. And I can tell you from experience with coming fourth in the Olympics, which is legitimately the worst place one can get. I refuse to watch the video. I hear people watch it and I want no part of it. As soon as I hear anything, it jumps back in my head and I think about all the little things I didn't do right that prevented me from being an Olympic medalist. And that's one of the hardest things as a coach to teach your athletes, because you want them to not, I guess, kind of like suffer the same losses that you do. You want them to learn from your mistakes, but at the same time, again, understanding their own limits, because, you know, essentially they have to live with their careers. But you don't want it to be a situation where, you know, again, it's just like, well, if you didn't breathe, you could have won, or, you know, anything like that, because again, holding your breath is super dangerous. And, you know, it's different for myself than it was for Leah holding, you know, their breath, but also understanding as it pertains to water safety, knowing your own limits. I grew up around swimming my entire life, but there are certain instances where I am not going. I will never go cliff diving. You will not catch me anywhere near jumping off of anything by choice. Someone have to push me, and I'm definitely getting hurt because I'm hitting every rock on the way down. Yeah, it's all around. It's a great visual. But, you know, my thing is, it's like, if there's water that I don't know what's in there, or I can't see the bottom, I'm not even getting in. And I'm a two-time Olympian, I'm a coach, and I understand my limitations because I know that I am a pool swimmer. And that's kind of where that is. So being able to understand, like, just because I know how to swim and I know how to be safe doesn't mean that any water I'll jump into. Yeah, I would agree too. Knowing, I teach my swimmers all the time, self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness. The best athletes are very self-aware of what makes them tick, what works, what doesn't work. But there is a balance. There has to be a balance between pushing yourself a little bit, but also knowing your limits. So I was a sprinter, so holding your breath was a thing to do. When I swam, though, underwater was not as big as it is now. So we have to train a lot of underwater work. But on the flip side of that, like, I actually had a discussion. I actually told my team this week. You know, we were doing what I would call a hypoxic set, where they have to hold their breath. And I explained to them, you do not do this set by yourself. You don't do this set without somebody there doing it. This is a set that we do while I'm watching. So I am very mindful of pushing my athletes. So if I have, you know, if it's a no breath 25 underwater kick, you know, I'm stressing underwater kick, but if they come up and breathe, you know, they come up and breathe. And so I'm always encouraging them, okay, try to go a little bit further, but also explaining, you do not do this by yourself. This is not, you do not do any sort of underwater by yourself. So it's just kind of finding that balance, because now swimming has completely gone, especially short course, completely gone towards underwater. Underwaters. Like, if your time needs to be improved in fly and backstroke and even sprint freestyle, underwaters is the way to get it, make it better. So I think it's just making sure to educate the athletes. And I try to encourage my athletes that it's not to be done alone. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go for a swim and I'm going to decide to do underwaters. No, that part of it, you can swim up and down all you want, breathing every 3, whatever, but underwaters do not do by yourself. That is not, I'm a big proponent of that. That's very important to me, that they don't do that type of set on their own. And then I also try to, we actually did one today where, you know, a matter of making sure to blow out all your air in your body as opposed to holding it, because it's the carbon dioxide that makes you pass out. But I try to stress as much as possible, do not do anything underwater alone. So.
What water safety lessons did you apply to your swim training as an Olympian?
Just making sure to breathe when I needed to breathe. That was pretty much it. I don't know if Janelle was at school when this happened, but we were doing some underwaters outside, outdoor pool. But the outdoor pool is long course. and we were doing 50-meter underwaters. And one of our teammates, it was the sprint group, so Janelle definitely was not there, but one of our teammates, he actually mistakenly hyperventilated before he pushed off the water. So when we he obviously got to the 50-meter before I did. And when I got there, I realized that he was still underwater and he was just floating down to the bottom. Fortunately, the pool outside was just 5 feet. And like I got to the wall, I touched, and I'm like, he's and so like a group of us were like trying to lift him. He had passed out and he was so heavy. And so the coach at the time was like trying to grab him from the top. I was trying to that was scary. So just witnessing that also was, goes forward to, obviously all of us learned our lesson at that point, which was don't hyperventilate before you, because at that time, this whole water safety thing was not as much of a discussion as it is now. So don't hyperventilate before you push off. Take deep, slow breaths, like stuff like that. So that was a pretty traumatizing experience. But he lived. Don't worry, he lived. He woke up, all good. But I think soon. We have to leave soon, just so you. I have to leave soon, just so.
This was our last question. So. Okay. If Janelle has any response.
I'm pretty sure I was there, not in that group, because I'm never in that group, but I do remember that happening in the middle of our main set, but the coaches wouldn't allow us to help or stop, even though we tried.
I mean, there's nothing for you to do, but.
With water safety, honestly, a lot of it is just kind of like knowing your limits. The challenging thing about being a competitive swimmer is that the limits, you're taught to change them. So if you thought that you could only go here, the next time you're expected to try and go here, and you're constantly pushing the limits. So it's one of those two where it's like, it's tough because, just as Leah said, like, okay, if a swimmer does come up before the time that she touches the wall, the expectation is, okay, try and go a little bit further. Because it's such a thin line between what's safe and not safe, especially when it comes to sports, because you're taught all the time to push past the pain, push through, persevere. So it's a little bit different, I would say. But it's also one of those things where even today, or just in general stuff, like if I'm riding the bicycle or, going on a run or even a walk, it's more a walk really, a brisk walk, as my watch tells me. I actually find myself, I'll start off like, okay, this is just going to be for leisure. And my watch goes off. It's like, okay, that's 1 mile. You did it in X amount of time. I'm like, okay, I have to read it now. I have to go faster.
Yes.
It's like, you can't break that cycle. It's so frustrating.
Yes.
So, it does not apply to water safety. Do not test your limits. Do not push them at all. But
don't push it by yourself.
Exactly.
Don't push it by yourself.
Yeah. So probably very similar to almost kind of like the swim with a pair near the lifeguard's chair, which is one of them. So doing something in pairs, that way at least like if something happens to you, the other person can go get help.
Well, thank you both for your time and your insight and advice. It was really an honor getting to hear from both of you. And just a reminder for our viewership that on May 15th, we have our world's largest tread. So you can sign up by going to treadathon.org or reaching out to tread@gmail.com.